Hello, my name is Casey Cassia, and I'm a research associate for the Center for Educational Development and Research at the University of Oklahoma. And today I'm presenting Spend More, Win More, exploring the relationship between athletic department expenditures and institutional athletic success. Higher education institutions have been critiqued on the ever-increasing costs of intercollegiate athletic departments, with modest evaluation on how these expenditures actually impact athletic outcomes on an institutional level. Claims have been also made that spending will transition to athletic success, and as observed by Dunderstat, the belief that those who spend the most win the most drives institutions to generate and spend more and more dollars. This has really resulted in several studies. However, the studies have been relatively few. Thus, the purpose of this study was to examine the relationship between public NCAA Division I institutions' athletic department expenditures and institutional athletic performance. So this was completed through 7 different research questions that examined 4 major expenditure categories. So recruitment expenditures, game and travel expenditures, facility expenditures, and coaching compensation expenditures, which were all found within the Knight Commission's College Athletics Financial Information Database. So first, each expenditure category, so research questions 1 through 4, were examined as single predictor models. Then a complete expenditure model was examined, followed by an expenditure model with an athletic control variables, and followed by that, the very last model was a model with athletic and institutional control variables. And so this really comes from previous studies on intercollegiate athletic spending and athletic success, which has been relatively mixed. Universities have and continue to invest heavily in intercollegiate athletics in the hopes of athletic success, which has been observed to some degree. So Jones found a positive correlation between athletic expenditures and Directors' Cup standings in a fixed effects panel regression. Recruiting and athletic success has also been mixed. Caro found a relationship that existed between strong recruiting classes and athletic success. However, particularly towards expenditures, Stephens was able to find a correlation between recruiting expenditures and wins in Division III baseball. And Stephens is really in the very minority of scholars out there who really kind of looked at how expenditures are directly being related to recruiting, rather than more of this indirect way of recruiting through building facilities, recruiting by name recognition, etc. And so spending for travel has also been found to be positively correlated to athletic success. In regards to facilities, despite observations and critiques on athletic facility expenditures, few empirical studies have really been really done to produce on really to see how and if these expenditures actually contribute in a direct way to athletic success. And so Hummel and others observed that there was no actual relationship between recruiting rankings and facility upgrades. Lastly, coaching salaries have been found to be positively correlated to athletic performance, and simultaneously have been found to have no correlation to athletic performance. So for this study, all of these expenditures were examined within a larger framework of institutional and athletic department controls. So 211 NCAA Division I institutions from the 2010 and 11 academic year to the 2016-17 academic year were examined and included in this particular study. And so the availability of information from these years was a little limited, and that's what kind of impacted the overall sample size as well as the years for this study, which resulted in convenient sampling being used. The Knight Commission and Intercollegiate Athletics College Athletics Financial Information Database collected and self-reported athletic financial data. The data is available on their website, and the data, unfortunately, was limited to public institutions, which again restricted the available sample for this study. The athletic expenses of interest for the study were recruiting expenditures, game and travel expenditures, facility and equipment expenditures, and coaching compensation expenditure. The Leadership Directors Cup final standings was used as the dependent variable of interest in this study because it has been used in previous studies as a measure of an institution's overall athletic success. And so again, looking at this idea of expenditures and directly rating it to an institutional level or an institutional level identity of athletic success. And so control variables were also built into this study. So institutional graduation rates were brought in to help attempt to control for institutional differences in their respective mission statements, while athletic department control variables were obtained from the EADA data set. I wanted to control for the differences in athletic department sizes and scopes, and also, so I also included percent of women's sponsored sports based on Lawrence and others' 2012 study that kind of made the argument that based on Directors Cup scoring, institutions that offered more women's sports and sports overall should theoretically score more points and have therefore a higher standing. And so that was something that I definitely wanted to account for in this study. So first, all financial data was transformed to the natural log. This transformation to the natural log helped to aid in the overall linearity and the distribution of the data. And other studies that have really kind of investigated expenditure impacts in areas of higher education, such as on impacts on graduation rates and expenditures on Directors Cup standings, have transformed their financial data to the natural log. And so I definitely want to follow that procedure there. Again, with convenient sampling, institutions with missing data were removed from analysis. The independent variables were standardized in an effort to place the variables on the same scale. So to better work with the overall data, I made sure to z-score the independent variables. So again, the purpose of this quantitative study was to examine the relationship between athletic department expenditures and athletic outcomes, particularly how recruitment, game and travel, facility and equipment, and coaching salary expenditures related to Directors Cup standings. So for this study, the nature of the variables indicated a panel regression was necessary based on the longitudinal nature of the data. In previous studies looking at expenses and the relationship of expenditures to athletic success have used a fixed effects panel regression. So in this particular case, I also wanted to confirm the fixed effects panel regression. So I used a Hausman test, which I conducted and was able to confirm that fixed effects panel regression was appropriate for this data set and for the study as well. And all computations were performed in Stata. So first, each expenditure was examined through a null model on the department, on the dependent variable to determine if a relationship was existent. The recruitment expenditure single predictor model had an overall good fit to the data according to the F-test. Recruitment expenditure was a significant positive predictor of an institution's Directors Cup total standing in the single predictor model. At first glance, this seems to support the idea that those who invest more in recruiting will be more successful athletically. So for the next research question, the game and travel expenditure model also had an overall good fit with the data. Again, as we can see with the F-test. And and was a significant positive predictor. And again, the initial results seem to support what has kind of been found in this category, in this kind of area um, of game and travel expenditures having a relationship to positive athletic outcomes, in this particular case, Directors Cup total points. And so now when we're looking at facilities and coaching and salary expenditures, facility and equipment expenditures were also a significant positive predictor of an institution's Directors Cup total points. In addition to the coaching salaries, as we can also see below. And this seems to support various studies indicating that there's a positive relationship in these areas, particularly for coaches, right? And so for institutions that may end up spending more on coaches that lead their respective teams to playoffs and championship game appearances, which kind of directly translates to more points in Directors Cup standings, right? So if a lot of your coaches end up going to playoffs or continue to the postseason and they get those bonuses, which would reflect in their salary, then certainly we can kind of say there's almost a little bit of a relationship there between coaching salary and Directors Cup total points. So on the surface, when again, we're not really considering other expenditures or other control variables, this idea of spending a lot for coaching facilities, seem to work out, right? However, in the overall expenditure model, or I guess, in this expenditure free-for-all, as I've kind of come to term it, games and travel expenditures are the dominant expenditure category that relates to Directors Cup standings. So when we actually, again, look at the model itself held an overall good fit to the data and indicated only game and travel expenditures held a significant relationship, again, positive significant relationship, right, to Directors Cup total points. And the findings seem to suggest that game and travel expenses significantly seem to outweigh other expenditure variables. But it's also important to consider differences in athletic department sizes and scopes. And so we do that in the very next research question when we begin to control for these items. And so when adding in these athletic control variables, game and travel expenditures were maintained as a significant positive predictor to Directors Cup total points. And there was a little change in the significance of game and travel expenditures as the primary predictor for Directors Cup total points. It seemed that the inclusion of athletic variables had little impact on the influence of the actual expenditures. And so when we continue on and add the institutional variable as well, try to account for differences in university, differences in the overall kind of universities, in the full model exploring the relationship of Directors Cup total points, we see that the F-test determined that the model maintained a good fit to the data. Game and travel expenditures maintained its consistency of being a positive, significant predictor of Directors Cup total points, while the other three expenditures, so recruitment, facilities, and equipment, and then coaching compensation, were not significant predictors. And this model indicated an institution gained approximately 51 Directors Cup points for every one standard deviation in game and travel expenditures. And so again, really kind of highlighting this idea that once we add in all of the control variables and looking at these expenditures and their relationship to Directors Cup total points, it seems to suggest this picture that game and travel expenditure is, of course, the dominant expenditure category, and that if you are trying to get more Directors Cup total points, then that would be the area, or the strategy would be to put basically to put more financing towards game and travel rather than as opposed to recruitment, facility expenditure, and coaching salary, again, based on this particular model. And so for implications, overall, the results found independently, each expenditure examined uh, contributed to Directors Cup standings, right? So when we think back to those original four null models of individual expenditure relating directly to Directors Cup points. However, in the full model, again, once we add in our control variables and all the other expenditures that are interacting with each other, then we see that game and travel expenditures were the lone significant positive predictor of athletic success. With only game and travel expenditures as a significant contributor to Directors Cup standings, it was possible that an extended season, when performing well athletically, was captured in the study, rather than increasing expenditures directly contributing to athletic performance, right? So this is something that I would really kind of want to follow up on and to investigate further. But the results of this study really seem to challenge some of the commonly held beliefs on this idea of spending heavily to win athletic contests, right? So the spend to win at all costs. And so higher education administrators have really kind of justified, again, this heavy spending on intercollegiate athletics with the notion that successful athletic teams help generate institutional revenue, student recruitment, or that kind of idea of that general front door approach to generate interest in their institution, and overall institutional prestige. And so this kind of idea of perhaps not necessarily putting money in, at least in coaching salaries, replacing all of your coaches on a yearly basis, or engaging in the overall arms race of facility structures and increasing facility costs, and spending everything to recruit athletically may not necessarily be the most advantageous way of trying to obtain these types of outcomes, again, of generating revenue or increasing prestige. And so higher education and intercollegiate athletic administrators should really be cautious when considering increasing expenditures, particularly for, again, these areas of coaching, recruiting, and facilities, which have been viewed as important for winning. So with Jones finding that athletic department total spending was a significant predictor of Directors Cup points and standings, and with this study finding that only game and travel was a significant contributor, it's possible that institutions which were strategic in their investments were the ones that really found success. So perhaps those that are putting more funds toward sports that are not necessarily as commonly offered, right? Such as football and basketball, are seeing a higher efficiency in Directors Cup points. So, for example, right? So in the EADA data set indicated that there were only 62 women's gymnastics teams competing in Division I. And when you compare this to the 349 men's basketball teams and 347 women's basketball teams, all in 2017, then it's possible that institutions that were investing more in women's gymnastics may actually see a greater return on Directors Cup points than those investing in basketball, simply by the nature of having to compete against fewer institutions. And so winning a championship among 62 teams is a little bit easier than winning a championship among over 300 teams. Just by the onset, you're technically, I guess, your statistics are a little bit better. And so certainly this phenomenon should be studied further to gain kind of a greater understanding of efficiency spending and capitalizing on Directors Cup points, particularly if this is something that higher education administrators at a particular institution has decided to really kind of focus on. So overall, the coaching and recruiting facilities not being significant contributors to institutional athletic success, higher education administrators should really be mindful of how they spend their resources. They should practice appropriate budgeting in recruiting, in facilities and equipment, and in coaching compensation especially, and should not necessarily just be spending heavily in the hopes of increasing the athletic success of their respective programs. Higher education administrators should be wary of heavy expenditures in intercollegiate athletics and should carefully consider if the investment is needed and how it should be incorporated into the overall institutional plan and mission of the university. So that is, if they want a new indoor facility, for example, don't build it just to get recruits and hope that it propels you to athletic success, right? Don't just participate in the arms race to participate in the arms race and to hope that it may get you some sort of benefit, but instead perhaps consider how that particular facility uh, fits into the overall campus plan and how it can be used for the entire student body. Or perhaps even consider building it in a way so it can also serve the community, right? So particularly with the year that we've just had, or with a lot of hurricanes and the winter storm, building these types of indoor facilities to where, yeah, certainly they can help to maybe bring in recruits, but they can also serve as a community storm shelter as well, right? This idea of building for the better good. And so higher education administrators should not really just gamble away resources in the hopes of achieving athletic success, but instead should consider how they should invest their resources and how these expenditures fit within the overall mission. That is, hopefully think beyond the scoreboard. So first, as I previously mentioned, further evaluation is needed to determine if the results indicated game and travel was important for athletic success, or if it was a lagged effect from postseason travel. Additionally, it is important to evaluate expenditures on a sport-by-sport basis. While there have been some examinations of expenditures on individual sport performance, many sports, predominantly even like the non-revenue Olympic sports, have not really been examined within the literature. And so future studies should examine the relationship between expenditures in other sports and positive performance, positive athletic performance and outcomes. So additionally, different expenditures may influence different outcomes in sports. So some sports may receive some level of boost from facilities and equipment. Recruiting expenditures may have a different impact on Olympic sports in comparison to their revenue sport counterparts, especially with a more consistent offering among the Division I membership of football and basketball in comparison to women's gymnastics and men's wrestling. Lastly, NCAA Division II and III can and should be examined with the EADA dataset to determine if differences exist. It's certainly possible that expenditures in different areas in those divisions may have a different relationship with institutional athletic success. So thank you so much for tuning in and watching this presentation. If you'd like to reach out to me, my email address is listed in the bottom right-hand corner. And so that is ccassio@ou.edu. Thank you so much again for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations.